Is Putin really ready to end the war, and what did the shamans of Mongolia whisper to Putin? We are not only talking about this today with the host of Khodorkovsky Life, Sergey Aslanyan. Sergey, I am glad to welcome you. Hello, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. Before we begin our communication, we here first traditionally address our audience. Whoever is watching right now, like this video, in advance. If you don't like it, you will take it at the end. Also write a comment right now, where you are looking at, your city, your country. We are very interested in the geography of our audience. And subscribe to this YouTube channel right now, because the messages that we are going to discuss now will be heard by as many people as possible. And this is definitely important during the information war. And I also remind you that we have a question for our esteemed audience in our chat. Now almost 300 people have voted, and the question is as follows. Does Putin really want to end the war by 2025-2026? 300 people voted, 40% believe yes, and the rest think not. Vote now if you haven't voted. I am interested in your opinion. And, Sergey, I suggest starting with very interesting statements that the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kyrylo Budanov, said that Putin is ready to end the war at the end of 2025, at the beginning of 2026. This will be affected by both economic and social problems in Russia. Sergey, I want to ask you, is Putin really tired of the war and is preparing to finish? What will this mean for his regime and for Putin personally? When the question, end the war, is raised, it is not discussed on what terms. Of course, the victors want to enter Kyiv and stick a banner over something significant for the people of Kyiv, if it means the end of the war. When we ask each other, especially referring to intelligence data on the end of the war, we do not take this factor into account. A war ends with someone's victory, something with a defeat, it ends in a draw. It ends because Russia has had enough of it economically or because it has become politically untenable. If you try to directly answer the question of whether he wants to or not, well, Putin really does not want to end the war. He did not start it so that this war would have any obvious parameters. Now he no longer has the option of victory. Of course, he would very much like to do it in 3 days. He is like St. George the Victorious. He attacked a neighboring country, solved some issues there, as it seemed to him. Apparently with fascism was something else, and now he is the winner. That's when the war ended. And here in 3 days he showed his strength. Russia is still a powerful superpower. Now this war, having gone into a protracted phase, it has become a favorite entertainment. Every morning look at the map, swim in the pool, bathe in all sorts of holy vodkas and scold your generals. And what do you have in the war? This is now a war for us, for all TVs. We watch on TV, who watches the Olympics, who watches some entertainment programs, who watches some others. And Putin watches his TV. And this war is delightful and interesting for him, and it makes him a politician. Because without this war, he is a rather unsuccessful dictator, for whom everything in the country is collapsing and everything is bad. And if you deal only with domestic policy, then there are a huge number of questions to him. And the Soviet Union, in principle, was created as a country that always had an external threat. The policy of the Soviet Union, as the successor of the Russian Empire, implied an emphasis on external interests more than on internal ones. This manifested itself in the desire to be the gendarme of Europe, to punish others, to dictate one's will and to constantly enter into conflicts. And for Putin, this war, it cannot be stopped. Why on earth would it be stopped if, firstly, it justifies the existence of Putin, secondly, the current one in the configuration of the state, and, thirdly, it is a favorite entertainment. And when intelligence brings data and says that Putin does not mind, but the date is some very strange, 2025-2026, that is, for example, for 2 more years Putin is going to fight, but at the same time he wants. That is, Putin will continue to want peace in the next 2 years, but nevertheless continue the war. Well, such intelligence is quite strange, very evasive. And, in fact, we see that this war, sucked out of thin air, which has no specific reason, cannot end due to some very objective circumstances. When Russia dried up, when the world community finally woke up, or when something happened, whatever happened, sanctions, Rammsteins, the appearance of American weapons in Ukrainian battle formations, it does not change Putin or his attitude toward the war. And when the question is raised whether Putin really wants to end the war, no, he does not want it. Are there coercive factors that can make him want to end the war? There are no strong ones. No international efforts and no failures of the Russian army have led to stopping this war. And today we see that Russia has become so involved in this war that the defense industry is working perfectly. America still supplies Russia with all the necessary parts and components for weapons. The rest of the world is helping with all its might. Intermediary countries, including very decent ones. Rogue countries with their militarized economies. That is, a very significant part of politicians, money, and defense factories on the globe is for Russia. And in this regard, why would the war end? There are no prerequisites. Putin is happy. Ukraine is dying. Victory will be Putin's. Well, he thinks so. Intelligence sets 2026 as a possible end date. No way. The war will continue and end for an unknown reason that no intelligence in the world will guess. Sergey, let's still fantasize. If Putin is really ready to end the war, how can the Kremlin political technologists and Putin himself present this news to the people? After all, it seems that the Russians are set for a long war. And won't the end of the war mean the end of Putin as a dictator? This is the main danger. Because while there is a very sluggish, mainly currency ruble rallying of the nation around Putin, for the sake of war, an external enemy, threats and NATO, they still promised a war with NATO and now it happened. This legitimizes Putin in all his actions, justifies and supports. This is important for him, because the people, as it seems to him, of course, are against everything bad, for everything good. Ukraine is very bad, NATO is very bad, so we, of course, are together with Putin. In fact, how exactly people relate to Putin, to Putinism, we see from two important factors of manifestation of a true attitude on the example of Prigozhin and the Kursk region, which has now completely gone into the jurisdiction of Ukraine. How did the local population react to this? The local population did not react to this in any way. That is, the very people who are presented to us as supporters of Putinism, people who support Putin and indulge his policies in every possible way, in fact do not exist. No one is for it. Nobody cares at all. Well, sometimes it is sad when you have someone else's tank, for example, driving over a fence. In other cases, judging by the behavior of the people who greeted the Prigozhin march with bread and salt, and the neutral attitude towards the entry of the armed forces of Ukraine into the Kursk borders, we see that the true attitude of the people to what is happening is quite indifferent. He is not interested in this war. The governor is interesting, who squeezed my material assistance promised by Putin in the amount of $10. I would really need these $10 now. Or $100. It would be generally gorgeous, although the damage is much larger. That is, the situation when Putin keeps the country in obedience, threatening it with war, the enemy and the need for unity. This is an artificial, completely manageable situation. Putin has imposed this way of interacting with society. A society that is absolutely indifferent imposes on him. It agreed with this. But before that, there was slavery, now there is Putinism. What's the odds? The main thing is not to touch us. Both Putin's power and Putin's ways of governing the country are based, of course, on war and militarization. Moreover, this very serious reform is taking place inside Russia now, when any state institution or structure is turning into a power agency. There is some kind of quiet Rosportovnadzor, which is engaged in hanging people in the markets, and then he sewed himself a uniform of a tunic, shoulder straps, awards and a hierarchical step. All sorts of debt collectors are not collectors, but bailiffs. This is a special service, which has seniority, bulletproof vests, weapons and the right to shoot at people. That is, absolutely everything is being militarized in Russia. This is a way of governing the country. In general, in theory, now kindergartens, schools, vocational schools will be considered military facilities, and bakeries, accordingly, will become defense facilities that are subject to protection. And that is why there will also be accounting, control and order. The Stalinist version, when everything and everyone needs to be supervised. In peaceful life, it is very difficult to supervise each person. And, secondly, there is no such task. Why would it be suddenly? In military conditions, this fully justifies the existence of this state. This is a state, it is absolutely scoundrel. This state is absolutely inhuman. This is a state, it is in order to bully the entire population. In peaceful life, especially when people are rich, wealthy, healthy, strong, how can they be treated? Then, it's very hard. They can fight back, they can think of something, they can start behaving politically actively. When you have a war, an external enemy, NATO has piled on you and is about to start hooliganism, the people are no longer asked, and a collective version of defense is imposed on them. This rests on the figure of the great commander-in-chief Putin, who is able to solve these acute problems. No time for discussions, no time for discussions. I know the right answer, and that right answer is a tank. Therefore, everyone go to the barricades. And, of course, this way of governing the country is the only thing that Putin can offer. Because, of course, he now has no peace scenario left. In the 2000s, it was. The country lived on oil rent. The country did not work. The country redistributed what was not theirs. Other people's cars, other people's Rolexes, other people's iPhones. I bought, sold, speculated, but did not produce myself. And there was enough oil money. This will not happen again. Putin has no other options. He needs a war, but it is not a people's war. It is not possible to unite. The attitude of the residents of the Kursk region to this war clearly showed that this is a war of Putin personally, and not of the people. It follows that there is no need to be afraid of the people. And so the people are neutral, that is, the people are not embittered at Putin. The people have no complaints about Putin. The people have requests in any situation. Putin has requests. O Great One, O Light of my eyes, O Vicar of the Lord God on earth, come and form the governor of the Kursk region, because he is bad, he did not give me the $100 you promised. That's all, in fact. That is, from the trough, these people raise their heads to a very small angle of view of reality. And if, finally, the war ends, it will not end, of course, with victory. It will be necessary to pass off defeat for victory. How will society react to this? It will not react to it in any way. From the point of view of a political strategist, of course, you need to make excuses. From the point of view of the authorities, some very legitimate and convincing arguments are needed to explain that this is what victory is, and glory, Russian Tsar. And people don't care. There is no protest in Russia. There is no society in Russia, there is no public opinion in Russia. In Russia, no one will ask a question, Mr. President, but we seem to have lost. Oh, Vladimir Vladimirovich, why is it that the Kursk region is gone, and at the same time Belgorod and Oral? Vladimir Vladimirovich, somehow we have become worse to live, and my neighbor was also killed. That is, the only reaction that can be noticed in society after the end of the war, no matter on what terms, will be that Putin sits on the sidelines in amazement and thinks, so, what to retreat with next? What scourge should be used to whip these people to keep them submissive? People will be disappointed as a reaction to peacetime, because the prospect of making money on the war is running out. These people have never earned 5 million rubles in their entire lives, and now for the very fact of signing a contract. Especially if you ran to Moscow, especially if you received a temporary Moscow residence permit for at least 5 years, came to the military registration and enlistment office with Moscow registration, then for the very fact you get such money that you will never earn in your life. And for Russia now, for lumpens, for disadvantaged people, for stupid people, for puzzled people, for them this is war and a way to make money. There will be no war, and that's it. What to go to the construction site? So there are Tajiks at the construction site. To lay asphalt. So asphalt is not laid in Russia, it is stolen. There are no social elevators. The opportunity to earn money was the last. Previously, shabashniks, they used to build dachas for someone. There was something to dig, there was someone to cut down the forest, there was a place to earn extra money. Well, in the end, again on trade. Now everything is Chinese, what kind of trade? And therefore, when, whether under duress, under circumstances, or by force of his will, Putin ends the war. For Putin, it will be a problem called how to continue to manage this herd, these people. And for people there will be disappointment. Volodya, what can you earn extra money on? Well, how to raise money, maybe kill someone else. Well, let's not kill Ukrainians, let's go or something, let's kill Belarusians. Well, pay us, otherwise we want something. We plan to paint the fence here, put a new stove, buy a machine, finally put a couple of greenhouses. Volodya, well, you provide it. Previously, the equilibrium in society was maintained precisely thanks to oil money, which was distributed throughout the country, even in those places where there was no earnings. People from hungry villages, for example, went to work on a rotational basis to large cities, such as Moscow, as security guards. Then Belgorod. The Belgorods came there for 2 weeks, lived in inhuman conditions, but for 2 weeks they assigned themselves the Belgorod region with money, and even there, on the outskirts, and in Russia everything is arranged in such a way that outside the Moscow Principality everything is outskirts, all desolation. Life, it is so patchy in big cities, but everywhere in the rest of the provinces, you can't earn money there, you can't live there, and nevertheless, even Belgorod men, when you communicate with them, what does a Belgorod peasant think about? He will now earn money, come to his Belgorod region, then still pre-war, agricultural, and make a couple of greenhouses there so that this year there will be more potatoes and life will be full. He will buy himself a car, and now this car can be bought for coffins. When the war is over, the only thing that people will realize and formulate as a claim to the authorities will be the question, what else can they earn to buy a car? There will probably be no other complaints. Moreover, the Russian authorities are always not subject to justice. The Tsars were not scolded, the general secretaries were not scolded. Stalin, like a bloody executioner, the harder he hit, the more respected he was. And there are no complaints about Putin in the same way. Volodya, invent the next war, let's go to war with the Belarusians and let us earn money for it. That's all, in fact. Sergey, about the fact that Putin can really solve the problem of ordinary Christians. My next question fits perfectly. But before that, we remind our audience that you can write a comment under this stream, your city, your country. We know that there are a lot of you. Right now, write and like in support of Sergey Aslanyan's analytics. Then this video will be watched by as many people as possible. And I also remind you that we have a poll in our chat. And the question is as follows. Does Putin really want to end the war by 2025-2026? Also, now vote, I am interested in your opinion. And Sergey, in the context of Budanov's statement, I cannot help but ask you about what is happening now on the territory of Russia in the context of the Kursk region and in the context of the Kursk operation. In your opinion, let's start with how you would assess the month of the Kursk operation and what processes the Kursk operation launched in Russia. The most important consequences of what happened in the Kursk region are the movement of generals along with the desks. Some of them went to the zone or to the pre-trial detention center, some went up to the office on the floor above. The country was not affected. The deep people reacted to the tragedy of the residents of the Kursk region, who are ridiculously called Kuryans, by increasing real estate rental prices. When people poured in from the villages, the first thing that greeted them was the price tag. If you want to rent a corner, then you pay me 3 times as much. Oh, you're in trouble, you know, I'm not the happiest either, and let you pay all my expenses with your grief. A state support system. No, it was declared, of course, by Putin. Listen, 10,000 rubles in Russia is not even a mockery. That is, 10,000 rubles can be converted into loaves of bread, it will not last long. That's all. And people have a clear understanding that no one needs them, that they are thrown out of this life, they are not taken into account by the state either as an object of care or as an object of protection. In the Kursk region, it seems, there is a war, and the enemy has come to the Kursk land. So you need to contact the governor. And the governor, he has the task of loyalty. He can't do anything else. He knows how to shut up. He knows how to plug holes in public utilities, silence the voices of the people and imprison journalists. A governor in Russia can do nothing else. He also knows how to steal. There is not a single governor in Russia who does not steal. Absolutely everything that happens with budget financing, road repairs, housing construction, railway utilities, medicine, all this goes through the governor's pocket. That's what makes him strong. And in the Kursk region, a tragedy occurred for people. For them, the war began on August 6th. Until August 6th, they did not have any war in the Kursk region. Well, you think, our planes are flying somewhere, I think, to Ukraine, our tanks are also going to Ukraine, and our troops are moving somewhere. It seems to be to Ukraine, judging by the reports. But on August 6th, they had a war, and they were all surprised. But only they were surprised. The whole country is talking about what is happening in the Kursk region, and something else happened in Moscow. An oil refinery was bombed, and a couple of wagons derailed in Siberia. And what else do we have? And in Moscow we have a festival. And what else do we have? And we also raised payments for signing a contract for the special military operation. The usual routine, ordinary life. And the Kursk region, it showed that the king has no clothes. It was somehow uncomfortable. But everyone already knew that the king was naked. And there is no army again. But somehow it was clear that it was not there. Well, those who are basically able to understand. That is, nothing new. And most importantly, this is the cold-blooded attitude of the authorities to what happened. She doesn't care about the fact that her land was taken away from her. She doesn't care about what happened to people. She doesn't have the strength and desire to do anything about it. And they were preparing a counteroffensive for a whole month. And now it turns out that, of course, you have prepared, you do not have operational approvals, you cannot reverse this situation, but for some reason the evil Ukrainian enemy deceived you again. Because on the one hand, you are trying to surround him, and at this moment for some reason he surrounds you. That is, complete incompetence. Therefore, the only consequences are the general's shoulder straps. Someone's stars faded, someone flashed brightly. The country just once again understood this as a given. That is, it turns out that if the enemy has entered the Russian lands, then so be it, let him take it. The Kremlin will not become impoverished. There is no army, there is no management. There is only Putin, who is holy and infallible. Therefore, it is sometimes appealed to, but only in the case of money. No one ever tells Putin, end the war. Everyone says, Volodya, where is my chervonets? He promised, but I did not receive it. Sergey, also in the German press, in Spiegel, there is information that Putin in Mongolia could consult with shamans about the war in Ukraine. Russian dictator Putin, according to Der Spiegel, during a recent visit to Mongolia, could meet with local shamans and, possibly, consult with them about the war against Ukraine. Russian writer and journalist Mikhail Zygar writes about this in his column. It's been a long time, honestly, we haven't discussed shamans in the context of Putin. How will you react to this news? I would like to hear your analytics. Do you really think that after 3 years of the Great War, Putin still believes in mysticism and shamans, and how can this affect his actions in the context of the war? To what extent does the West care about Russia and this war? To what extent do Germans care where Austria is and where Australia is? As you spell Iran or Iraq correctly, they indiscriminately turn a trip to Mongolia, which they also don't care about, into an opportunity to communicate with shamans. In order for Putin to communicate with shamans in Ulaanbaatar, you need to bring a shaman there from somewhere. Because Mongolia is a non-pagan country. Shamans are a little further in geography, but there are no shamans here. Mongolia is a Lamoist country. Lamoism is a branch of Buddhism. There are no shamans there. There is worship of spirits, but shamans are not attached to these spirits. And there are such special stone places throughout Mongolia called obo. In these obos, there is usually either some fragment of the saint, reminiscent of relics from Orthodoxy, or an offering. That is, this is a kind of way of communicating with the Yerala, which the Mongols have a slightly different status. But there is no person with a tambourine who is a shaman, and with whom you can talk about something. You can go to a Lamist temple and talk to lamas there. Lamas are specific guys, they are somewhat different from their Tibetan counterparts. They have a different worldview and they have a different religion. But how do the Germans know about this? They saw this Mongolia on the map only now. Before that, they did not even know in which part of the world to look for her. But once Putin flew to Mongolia, Der Spiegel magazine opened Wikipedia, he said, "Oh, Mongolia. Wow. It used to be called Hukdinjanyemik. Ulsinyik Dulgur. It turns out that they have Ulaanbaatar there. Well, let's see what's there." And since outwardly the picture coincided with their idea of a backward world, well, that is, some rags, some strange houses that look like pagodas, there must probably be shamans here. Oh, exactly, they said, Putin communicated with shamans. 2 wagons of shamans were brought specially to Khalkhin Gol and Stove. Sergey, here are also from rumors to more interesting and serious information from Reuters. They write that Russia will conduct nuclear tests for the first time since 1990 if Biden allows Ukraine to strike with Western missiles on Russian territory. This is reported by Reuters. Nuclear threats, in fact, have been heard from the first day of the Great War from Putin and Russia. Although, to be honest, no one really believes in it anymore, we still can't ignore it. I would like to hear your analysis, whether Russia can really conduct a nuclear exercise, what this will mean and how, in your opinion, the West may react to this. Most of all, this news frightened the Russian military, because there was definitely nothing worse than nuclear exercises in their lives. And here, again, a few formulations, because the deputies are talking about it. Let's conduct a test somewhere in the next Semipalatinsk can demonstrate the presence and possibility of a nuclear explosion. When the military are asked about this, they, after drinking a bottle of moonshine in one gulp, because it is very scary, begin to say that, apparently, it will be some kind of exercise. But they have two options. The first is the staff officers. When a small car drives across the desk, they say, "This is a nuclear bomb, look, we just dropped it, that's it, we won the war, we disperse, but drink one more, eat bacon." There is a variant when really, as it was, for example, in the same Semipalatinsk test site, research was carried out on the effects of radiation on living people. As a result, there was a huge array of disabled people, since through the cloud of radiation they let the very army that passed and endured laboratory tests, which confirmed that radiation sickness is really terrible, and the disabled remain incurable and no one needs. What exactly is implied, no one knows, because no one is seriously considering this option. But when you need to say something further, well, raising the degree of rhetoric. So, the red lines, well, 2 years about the red lines, Medvedev told something like that, moved these red lines, dragged them around, then handed them over to the dry cleaners, washed them, after that they shone again. But again, they have been trampled on many times and somehow no longer impresses anyone in principle. Well, what is left? Well, then we will definitely bang the bomb. And this, if we assume that in fact at least somehow seriously discussed, is a disaster. Because the army just knows that it will not take off, will not work. And for them, it is not even clear what is worse when it did not explode or when it did explode. The probability that it will tear is close to zero. We haven't been working for a very long time. You know how. Grandpa, of course, is a respected impotent, and he, of course, talks about his exploits and the fact that he was nuclear in his youth. All the collective farm young ladies still remember this with a shudder, but since then few people have used my grandfather for this purpose. And the grandfather on the rubble quietly shook off, withered, mummified and turned into a stencil against the background of the fence rather than into a real force. Although my grandfather used to be such that everyone, if necessary, was terrified in both directions, who ran away. Russia has a nuclear doctrine, exactly the same. Yes, we are here now, the heritage of our ancestors, the weapons of the 60s, which we not only did not use, we do not even remember how we really stored. We buried something, connected something, something rusted. It seems that we transported something somewhere and hid it somewhere again. And all this now needs to be obtained. And in Russia, there is not a single person in the army who knows how to handle this. Well, in theory, so to speak, the division commander, he will now line up the personnel, there is Lieutenant Ivanov, well, quickly. No one knows how it is, what it is. All have tests, all have permits, all first-class specialists, some even have the letter M here. This is a master. No one knows how it works. What to do about it? Does it work at all? Answer, if somewhere Medvedev again with his red lines, erased in the mouth, says, now for sure. Putin will nod his head, the general staff will receive an order, everyone will understand something and run to execute. Nothing will work. If nothing will work, two things will not work. And the whole world is watching how the Russians, it would seem, are preparing, brought a primus, are going to light the fuse. They have a nuclear warhead buried there on the edge of the forest. I myself do not remember on which side the fuse, where the breach, where the combat part. Well, now, probably, it will work. Oh, it didn't work out. You didn't guess. Well, let's do it again. All this just cannot be opened. This will all be just at the level of a leak. And most importantly, this will be accompanied not only by a leak, but also by the bewilderment of the performers. Then they will all write everywhere that, and we have today. No, look at what happened. Oh, look at how the morning began on our collective farm. And when the General Staff nevertheless says to detonate a nuclear bomb on the 5th attempt, this is where the worst will begin. Well, first of all, again, because it will not explode, and then at some point something will happen somewhere. And in Russia, no one is ever ready for any action, or for any impromptu, or for any consequences. That is, Russia, which was running into war, was not ready for war. Moreover, Russia is not ready for any war, always preparing for it. That Russia was not ready for the Russo-Japanese War, that Russia was not ready for the First World War, that Russia was not ready for World War II, that it was not ready for Afghanistan, which it entered, that it was not ready for Syria, which it entered, that it was not ready for Chechnya, which it entered, she was not ready, that she was not ready for Ukraine, which she entered. And against this background, to assume, that the Russians have nuclear potential is completely different people. This is completely different technologies. This is a completely different level. There are such specialists, without fear or reproach. That is, there is nowhere to be found. Everything ends in war. No one knows how to fight. Any general is a log, and so on. All the generals are smart. All the division and division commanders have graduated from the academies, and they even understand what exactly they graduated. All missiles are in good working order, routine maintenance has been carried out, warheads are ready. Everything is at the first request of the party. But there is chaos and devastation everywhere in the country, there are no specialists, and competencies have run out. The fence fell, something rolled away, the inventory numbers do not match. And only here is perfect order. I don't recognize Russia in this description. Therefore, of course, by raising the temperature, it is necessary to intimidate the West, declaring that we are going to use nuclear weapons, to press the red button. Who would have believed it? The West, namely its part, which has long been aware, takes Russia seriously and understands that Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland are next. They look after it very competently, analyze everything perfectly and are also aware. The rest who believe that shamans run around in Mongolia think that you just need to talk to them. They, of course, are not aware and may be scared just in case. But those who are responsible for supervision, they carefully step aside for a coffee break and say, listen, well, an office joke. The Russians have nuclear weapons, look, they will now look for the red button with a flashlight and press it. Stock up on popcorn. Sergey, just during our conversation, the Russian law enforcement media, the so-called media, report that Putin has increased the size of the Russian army to 2 million, almost 400,000 people, among them 1.5 million are military personnel. And we also remember quite recently the information from the Institute for the Study of War that Putin does not rule out the possibility of announcing another wave of mobilization. In this context, you yourself have already begun to say that Putin may not stop in Ukraine and go further. Do you think that Putin could theoretically communicate with shamans? Can they whisper permission to him? Or, let's say, go further, for example, to the Baltic countries? Putin already has a lot of whispers in his head, advising him to make different decisions. Shamans are not needed for this. And a lot of different and interesting things have already been whispered in Putin's head. But the fact that he signs a document to increase the army, and up to 2,400,000, and previously it was 2 million, this suggests that he needs 400,000 in order to expel Ukraine from the Kursk region. Because he can't do anything else. With the forces that are available today, it will not be possible to recapture the Kursk region. And even more so, it will not be possible to hold back the front in any way, because Ukraine can move at any time to even more active actions, although there is always intelligence that Ukraine has no forces. There are no weapons, the Americans have not allowed anything, so the Ukrainians, of course, cannot do anything. In 2.5 years, we see how exactly Ukraine can do nothing. And this is really a very important point, because the increase in the army by plus 400,000, this indicates the mobilization figures. This means that if the decree is signed, mobilization will be announced. If war is not declared, it will take place at any cost. The printing press will begin to create waste paper. First they will announce that the entrance costs 5 million, then they will raise it to 7-9 million, and then to 10 million. This is necessary to collect 350-400,000, which are necessary in order to win the war and not lose it. Sergey, thank you for this conversation, for your analysis, for your answer. And let me remind you that Sergey Aslanyan, the host of Khodorkovsky Life, answered today's questions. We appeal to our viewers once again. If you like this video, right now put a like, write a comment where you are watching us from, your city, your country. Also, subscribe to this channel, because this way as many people as possible will see the messages. And answer the question that more than 1,500 people answered in the chat, whether Putin really wants to end the war. 31% believe yes, and 69% believe no. Our sociology is so interesting. Sergey, thank you and see you.